so much for letting me stay at your house. I really appreciate it. Do you happen to have a toothbrush that I could borrow? What the heck has happened to my skin? Oh my gosh, look at all those wrinkles. What's this? There's no elastic left in that skin. Hey cousin, what the heck has happened to us?
Hi there. So we're going to talk about developmental aspects of the integumentary system, starting with the moment of conception. So when you were first conceived, you were just one cell that went through a bunch of mitosis and made a little ball of cells. But pretty early on, probably even before you had traveled through the fallopian tube and landed in the uterus, some of those cells started to become different than other cells or differentiated. And maybe it has to do with just the location they are on the little sphere of cells. Some of them will start to fold inward. So the little ball of cells will kind of fold in on itself and develop into three different layers. The inner layer called endoderm, the outer layer called ectoderm, and the layer in between called the mesoderm. Some of this tissue will turn into the placenta, but right off the bat, your epidermis, which is your outermost layer, will start developing from the ectoderm. The dermis and the hypodermis, which reside just underneath the epidermis, develop from the mesoderm. So they come from different developmental layers it's called a blastula, this little developing phase. The sebaceous glands that are located next to each hair follicle secrete sort of a waxier version of sebum when you're living in this wet environment of amniotic fluid to protect the developing skin from the watery environment that you're living in. Sometimes when babies are born, particularly if they're born prematurely, some of that waxy coating will remain on the surface of their skin and they'll look kind of creepy. Usually the nurses grab the baby and kind of wipe it off so that it looks adorable when the parents, who are all emotional, first hold their baby. But there's lots of reasons why a baby can look kind of scary when it first pops out. Another reason it can look kind of scary when it first pops out is if it's kind of a younger baby, if this dermis and the epidermis haven't gotten thick enough yet and it's still really thin, sometimes the little hairs that don't end up projecting through your epidermis and coming out into the air are still showing in baby skin. So they'll look all furry, like this baby has a little fuzz all over it. And that could be scary if you're like, oh no, we have a furry baby. We had a puppy instead of a baby. Another condition that infants can have is after they're born, when their sebaceous glands are still developing, sometimes they'll overproduce sebum. And instead of turning into a waxy coating, they'll get like a little case of baby acne. Those little white bumps that they get as their sebaceous glands finish developing are called milia. But they'll grow out of that. So you guys are going to learn about another condition when too much sebum is secreted around their hair that results in them having sort of a waxy cap on their head called cradle cap as well. But you have to just let them grow out of it. If you try to scrub off their skin or you use acne products on baby skin, it would just destroy it because it's really delicate skin. So we're going to be talking about a couple different types of glands in your skin and mucous membranes and serous membranes. And I think it's important to discuss this phrase secretion. Secretion is a word that can be used to describe the process of making and releasing a product, as well as it can refer to the actual product that is being secreted. So sebum is a product that is being secreted. The process of making it occurs in sebaceous glands. And you have other glands that secrete things. Endocrine glands are all the glands in your endocrine system that secrete hormones all over the place. But in your skin and membranes, we're going to be focusing more on exocrine glands, glands that secrete something specifically to another spot and not just into the bloodstream. You can classify glands by their shape. The mucous membranes and serous membranes have a lot of unicellular glands. This is a goblet cell in the pseudostratified ciliated epithelium of your upper respiratory tract. Or you can have simple glands that are just a little simple tube, or some that are compound and have many tubes. I think sweat glands look simple, and oil glands look more like compound ones. Of your sweat glands, you have two different varieties, and the eccrine sweat glands are the most abundant ones that you have all over yourself, a lot of them on your palms and forehead. And the apocrine glands are the ones that you find in places where you grow hair at puberty. So your armpits and your groin area have special sweat glands that secrete fatty acids and proteins. These fatty acids and proteins can sometimes be used as food for bacteria that are growing on your skin. And that the waste products from those bacteria is what can make you have different smells. Those fatty acids and proteins are probably producing pheromones, which are not supposed to have a smell to them, but if bacteria start gnawing on them, then they do have a smell. And those pheromones are heavily associated with attraction. So I don't know, you guys are old enough that you've probably fallen in love with someone and maybe been close enough to them to know that you just like are attracted to the smell of them, and you're just like want to inhale deeply whenever you're with them. When I was first teaching, I had just gotten married, and if I got home before my husband did, I'd like to go put his shirt on just so I could just wear it and smell the smell of him, because it made me so happy. So that's definitely associated with development and procreation. You have some modified glands. Your ear wax glands in your ears and your mammary glands in your breasts are modified sweat glands that make special secretions, either wax or milk. And this diagram is the diagram you're going to be studying primarily in this chapter. Shows everything. These little compound glands that are surrounding the hair follicle are the sebaceous glands. And then the sweat glands are not next to a hair follicle. It's this coiled up gland that's coming out of a little sweat pore in between and near the hair follicle. A lot of people know that your sebaceous glands secrete sebum. The sebum, we're going to go over the role of it, is to keep this dry surface of your skin moistened, but sometimes if they get blocked up, they make pimples. The secretions are definitely influenced by hormones, which is why when your hormones start changing during adolescence, that's when you start having more oily skin and hair, and you might get acne as the pores get clogged. So we're going to spend a lot of time discussing, you guys are going to be researching products for acne and what all the different components of skin that are influenced in making a pimple. By the time you're about 30, your skin begins to show the cumulative effects of aging. Starts to get drier. You reduce the amount of sebum that you're making. Mitosis starts slowing down, so the thickness of your epidermis starts to thin, and you start to heal slower from little insults that occur in your skin. Scaling and dermatitis, which is an inflammation to the external environment, becomes more common as you get older. And then so your skin is getting thicker. Your skin will get more dry and itchy as it's producing less sebum. There's also things that happen in the lower levels of the skin. In the hypodermis, you get a diminished amount of adipocytes or fat cells in the subcutaneous layer, which is insulating you. So old people get cold more easily than young people do. And that's true even if you're a fat old person. So it's the fat that's underneath your skin, not the fat that's necessarily in your belly or hanging out in under your arm flaps or whatever. So this is just the hypodermis fat. The fibers in your dermis that are elastic start to just fail. And that's why you could see Dr. Barbie's elbows were all stretched out and her skin was no longer springing back together. If you have the opportunity to babysit a little child, a child that's like less than 2, when they're super fat, you can see how puffy their skin is. They have a lot more fat in their hypodermis. Their knuckles almost indent. And if you touch their skin, it springs back immediately. But as you get older, and you probably can see this on your grandparents or me, you can see like all your veins and things like showing right through your skin because it's so much thinner. Skin that moves a lot, like your face, if you make the same expressions a lot, the little random collagen fibers start to arrange themselves by being pushed into the same shape all the time. And so they end up making ridges and valleys that form into wrinkles depending on the faces that you make. So if you make really horrible faces, see, you always frown. Eventually, after your whole lifetime of making that frown, your wrinkles are going to reflect the expressions that you carry. So that resting bitch face is going to turn into your old person face. And maybe you should start working on having a more pleasant resting face. You also get a decreased number of melanocytes. Those are the cells that make melanin, which is your natural protection from UV radiation. And Langerhans cells are immune cells that can help you with immune response as well. So as you age, you get an increased risk of skin cancer. You're going to be studying the different layers of the epidermis. This is the layer on the bottom that has these Merkel cells, are part of the sensory cells. These mitosis is going along right at the bottom, and then you have the melanocytes that are making the pigment happening right at the bottom. So we'll be studying the layers. You need to get to know the different layers of your epithelium. Most things are happening on the bottom layer. And I think you should, at this point, be able to answer all the questions in your packet about the developmental aspects of the integumentary system. Bye.